Welcome back, Nuggets, to somewhat of a different video. I wanted to do sort of a story time thing because I've been getting a lot of questions about how I became a game developer. Because some of you might know that, next to Cherry Nugget Games, which is sort of my free time project, I am also a paid full-time game developer. And so there's a lot of questions about how that came to be and how I got there, and I have some insights that I want to share with you if you also want to take on that journey of becoming a game dev yourself, and not only just an indie, but perhaps also doing it for your main job. So let's get into that story. Again, this is going to be somewhat of a different video, basically sort of a more talking video. If you like it, hit that like button. If you're not subscribed to the channel, well, go subscribe. And if you haven't wishlisted Wrenched, what are you still doing here? Well, watch the video first. Then go to Steam. There's a link in the description and wishlist Wrenched. Alright, so how did I become a game dev? Well, it all started when I was a little boy, I guess, because I always wanted to do something creative. I remember vividly always drawing, having a sketchbook with me, writing comics, drawing comics, making stories, making animations even. And I had my dad build this sort of old school overlay light box thing with which I could do hand-drawn animations. And when my dad and my brother would be working outside, I would be inside writing stories, drawing comics, and doing stuff like that. So ever since I was young, I was really keen on doing something creative. And I always had this idea, all right, I am going to be a comic book artist or I'm going to be an animator. And so I started reading about that. I started watching cartoons and doing sort of research into animation and how to do that. I got some books about Walt Disney in the library because remember when I was a little nugget, there was no such thing as the internet, so you had to do it with books and with the library. Damn, that makes me sound old, but you know, I am sort of old, so I guess that clocks out. So I started doing research into that, and all through grade school, drawing was my favorite subject, arts and crafts was my favorite subject, and I used to make all sorts of stuff and just really be interested in anything creative. But then the internet came, which was, I guess, 1994 here in the Netherlands. And my dad was really into computers and really into technology, so we were one of the first in the street to have a computer. This sounds so... It really makes me sound old. And so we were always messing about with that, and we had this old matrix printer, which was a giant printer with a giant print head, which would make like terrible sounds, and it would print off stuff at 6 a.m. in the morning, wake up my parents, and all sorts of crap like that. But that really sparked something in me, right? So it wasn't just drawing, but now I had this digital tool with which I could also create stuff. And we had some games on there. I remember a game called Jetpack. I'll see if I can get some footage of that, which had a level editor, so you could make your own games. So all of a sudden, instead of just drawing comics and writing stories and making animations, I was like making my own stories and my own worlds within games. And that was amazing. And I remember just feeling like, even for that time, right? And the possibilities definitely weren't endless, and we didn't have the tools that we have right now. But I was like, oh my God, you could do so much with this. This is amazing. And then I figured out, or a colleague of my dad actually told me, that there were also tools in which you can build your own software and games. And he was a software engineer. My dad was working at a school, and they were working on a program they could use at that school. And he introduced me to Delphi programming, which is sort of a very old programming language, and he had some big books about that, and he gave me those books, and I started making my own software. And that's sort of when a switch happened inside my head, where I wasn't really drawing anymore and I wasn't really animating anymore, but I was writing software, and I actually made my own sort of Photoshop clone. We had like Photoshop 2, and I was like, oh yeah, I'm also going to create a Photoshop. Then I actually did it. It was very basic, and I needed some help with that. But I had to figure everything out, and that was, I guess, part of the fun, right? YouTube wasn't a thing, so you couldn't just look up a tutorial on how to make something, as you can do right now, right? And so that really sparked my interest in my creativity in a different way, instead of drawing, but more inside of the programming space. And so all through middle school, I picked all the subjects that would set me on my path to become a programmer. And so at the end of middle school, I decided, all right, I'm going to, I believe it's called computer science. I'm going to study computer science. And so I enlisted, I don't know if that's the right word, but I started a college for computer science. It was in Utrecht. I went to live outside of my parental house, in a dorm room. I had some great friends, and I was super excited to start writing code and making all sorts of cool stuff. And computer science is a bit more, it's not just programming, but it's also like the hardware side of it. And so I thought that was actually really interesting, because still some of my arts and crafts history came through, so I could build computers and build PCBs and stuff like that. So I was really hyped. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm going to do this. But then, after about a year and a half, I got sort of really depressed, and I got really, I guess my dream was shattered a bit, because instead of just writing code and making programs and doing software development, like 50% of the time was spent on planning and figuring out how to write code instead of actually writing code. And we had a couple of classes, one of which was rational rows. I just don't even Google it, but it's like UML. So you had to plan out your entire code base, and you had to plan out all the classes and all the functions, and then you had to start writing it. So a big chunk of time was just, I don't know, like paperwork. And so I was like, wait, I'm used to just opening up a code editor and start messing about with the code and writing programs and figuring out how stuff works. I don't want to plan all of this. And we had a couple of classes like that. And so over the course of the first year and a half, I started getting more down and more like, what the hell am I doing here? This is not my thing. And then in the final year of in the final phase of the second year, and so here in the Netherlands, I don't know if you guys around the world have something similar, but we have like this. It's like a pre-bachelor state for your degree, right? So you get that after you finish like the first, sometimes the second year, and with that sort of certificate, you could start a different school. And so I was really sad on getting that certificate, because I was like, I'm not happy here. I need to do something else. I didn't know what, but I was set on going to figure that out. But I still had to finish the second year. And so at the end of the second year, there was a project. We've been doing a lot of project work. And the project actually was making a game. And I was living with a couple of guys, and we were working together there, because they were also in my classes. And I was like, you know what, guys? I am just not feeling this entire thing. I think I want to quit, but I have to finish this project. What are we going to do about it? And then at that point, we sort of had a huddle, and they said, you know what? Why don't you do the art? Since we need to make a game, and I believe the project was making a Game Boy game, and well, we had to do the whole architecture stuff and a whole emulation, and we had to do everything. But we also had to make a lot of art, right? Because we were making a game. And I was like, all right, sounds good. I can do the art, I've been doing a lot of art and design in the past, so I might be able to, still have some of that talent in me. Um, and the funniest thing happened, or well, maybe it's not funny per se, but I sort of felt better immediately. I started creating worlds and I started creating art, and we had to make sprites, and we had to even do some technical stuff, right? Because since we were making a Game Boy game, everything had to be compressed and everything had to be like within special color palettes and stuff like that, and bit swapping and all those cool things, and technical things that I still like, but more centered around art and about creation. And I actually went overboard way too much. I made like an entire world with an entire backstory and characters. It was way too big for what we were doing, and I don't think that we even used half of it. But I was finally sort of, it sparked something in me. It sparked my creativity again, and it sparked my joy again in well, I wouldn't want to say life. I wasn't that depressed, but at least in my in my education and in my possibly my future career. And so that really was the moment that I was like, okay, maybe I want to create games. Is that even possible? And so I started digging around, and there's actually a couple of very good educations here in the Netherlands, one of which is the Utrecht School of Arts, which at the time had game design and development. And I was like, oh yeah, I want to go there and I want to learn how to create games. That would be so amazing. But there was just a little caveat. So I still had to finish the second year, right? And so the game project, it wasn't the final project. We had to do some more things because, I needed that certificate to start at the Utrecht School of the Arts. And I had this one project, which was a JavaScript project, and it was a class. We had to make something in Java, and I remember vividly needing to finish that class in order to get the certificate. But I was in my room, I was behind my computer, I just couldn't figure it out, and I was crying, and I was like, I'm not gonna make this. My future is all messed up. Everything's lost. And I went in. I needed to hand in the assignment. And the teacher that gave us that class, he was really, he was the grumpy kind of teacher, and he was always complaining about, back in my day, we used to use punch cards to program, and we used to do all sorts of stuff by hand, and now it's like he was that type of guy, right? The army boot camp type of, you probably had some teachers like that. And so I was like, all right, so I have basically nothing, and I need to hand in this assignment, and if I don't get like a good grade, I couldn't get my certificate, and then I don't know what, I will work at the supermarket or something like that. And I remember coming into his classroom to hand in my assignment, and he was looking over what I made. I, of course, made something, but it was nothing. And he was like, it's not that good, right? And I said, yeah, sorry, sir. I know. I honestly, I couldn't. I just couldn't. I'm not. This is not the place for me. Yeah, I just couldn't. And he was like, I heard that you intend on leaving, because after the second year I was gonna leave either way. But and I said, yes, sir. That's right. I'm just. This is not my jam. I thought I loved computer science, but I want to do something creative. And he was like, I see. You know what? And he looked me dead in the eye. Still getting a bit emotional about it. He looked me dead in the eye and he said, so you want to go on with your life and you don't want to be here, right? You know what? I'm just going to give you a C so you can get on with your life. And I was like, wow. And so I don't think he will ever watch this, but thank you, sir. You basically saved my life. So that was that. He basically gave me a C, and I got my certificate, and I, could start at the Utrecht School of the Arts to learn how to program games. I don't think it's wasted time. You know, I learned a lot about programming, about computer science, about more technical stuff like that. So I think it's still valuable that I did that. I had a 2 year delay, obviously. I was the oldest in my classes at the Utrecht School of Arts. But I don't think it's a waste of time. But, you know, fast forward a little bit. Started started game design and development. I believe right now they split it up into 3 different sections, like game art, game programming, and interaction design. But at the time I started, everything was together, so I got all sorts of classes, which was really fun. And everything was, you know, creative. It was about creating stuff, about making games, about stories, about basically all my interests, all my past interests, and all my current interests combined into one, well, I don't want to make it sound too good, but magical mix of, you know, of creativity. And I really started to flourish again, and I really loved being there. I loved making the projects. I loved making art. I loved making, you know, games, basically. Making games, I really figured out at that point in my life that making games is my passion, is the thing that I want to do, and I sort of gravitate back to it always. Fast forward, in the 3rd year, pre-final year, we had to do an internship, which was amazing. And we got this email we got this email from a company of 2 guys that also went to the Utrecht School of the Arts, and they were looking for some art interns. And I thought, well, this actually sounds pretty cool, so I'll just send them an email. I was super nervous, although in the email I guess I sounded rather confident. Attached my portfolio, and I was like, hey guys, I see you guys have sort of a quirky style. I also have somewhat of a simple quirky style. You know, let's meet up and let's see if we can work together. And so I got invited over there, and we had this talk, and we really clicked, and we really, you know, had a great chemistry. And a couple of months later, I started my internship there, and it was basically the best thing that I guess ever could have happened for my game development career. I learned so much. I had a great mentor, Gene van Lichtenvecht, shout out. He's a great artist and a great game developer himself, and he basically taught me everything that I know today. And I think, looking back on it, I think I learned more during my 6-month internship than I learned 4 years in high school or college, I guess. But that's just the way it goes, right? So that's one thing that's really important, I guess, if you ever intend to do something like this. Get a good internship with a good mentor. I think that's, if you can get that, then you're solid. So we hit it off pretty good. Of course, I had to go back because I had to graduate. I wanted to do my master, so I wrote a thesis about character design. But I was like, you know, I kind of love this. Can I stay on with you guys? And they were like, yeah, sure, we'd love to have you. And so I started freelancing at that studio while I was still graduating. And that's, of course, a great entry into, you know, getting a job. Because after I graduated, they were like, all right, Lex, you're coming to work for us. Fast forward 15 years already. I'm still working at that same studio. We had a lot of changes, a lot of people coming in, people coming out, projects, a lot of basically a whole world of difference. I also met my wife over there, so that's another plus. And still to this day, I still work at that studio making games. And so that basically is the story of how I became a full-time game developer. And I don't think that anytime soon I will quit and do something else. Because like I said, during my days at the Utrecht School of the Arts, I really discovered my passion for making games. And yeah, this is just something that is an integral part of me. And I don't think that anytime soon I will stop making games. Now, there are, of course, a lot of things that I learned during this 25-year period of my life that I think might help you guys as well if you want to walk in my shoes or become a full-time game developer as well. Well, the first point is actually more of a life advice. I would say if you're unhappy somewhere, change your environment. And I really mean that. I was super scared when I was studying computer science to switch, because I was like, oh, I don't know what's going to happen. What if I don't get that certificate? What if I don't get what if I can't get into the Utrecht School of the Arts? What's going to happen? I don't know. But I was just so unhappy. And after I made that change, and I guess it wouldn't have mattered what the change was, but after I made that change, well, basically my entire life changed, and I became so much happier, and I found my passion and all these good things. I found my wife, and all these good things happened. So if you're stuck somewhere and you're unhappy, don't be afraid to switch things up, because things can, well, basically only get better. Then there's this whole portion of actually studying to become a game developer, because a lot of you, I guess, are at home and you're like, wait, I can just Google some tutorials and I can become a game developer myself. I can learn how to program, I can learn how to make art. And that is definitely true, and if that is something that you want to do in your free time, go for it, because making games is awesome. And if you want to become a game developer, there's one thing you should do: make games. And not just one, but make a lot of games. And if you make more games, you will become a better game developer. Nevertheless, if you have the finances and if you have the opportunity to study somewhere or to take a class or a course to become a game developer, I think it's very, very valuable. On a couple of for a couple of reasons. Like, one is networking, right? I met so many cool people during my time at the Utrecht School of Arts. I met teachers, which are like also professionals. They could help me. I met a lot of friends. I met a lot of, well, obviously people that studied there also who also became game developers. So that sort of opens up a whole bin of people that could help you, you could work with, you can ask questions to. A lot of the guys started their own studios and own companies, so you can work with them and you can ask them if you want to start your own company or your own studio, how things work. So basically you build an entire network of game developers that can help you, and which you can help as well. So that is something that is super valuable. And also, during your time studying, you build a portfolio. So at the end of college, I had a very big portfolio filled with art, with games, with code, with projects, basically anything that I needed if I wanted to get a job interview somewhere and land that job. Because that, if I may say so, is one of the most important things, and also one of the questions I get a lot. I actually get some emails from people like, hey, could you judge my portfolio? Because, I've been an art lead and a game development lead for a long time right now, so I judge a lot of portfolios. I might actually do a video about how to build a good portfolio. That's coming next. But again, like, building a portfolio, that is something that is super important. And while you're in high school or while you're in college, that is something that is really easy, because you need to make projects and you need to make art and you need to make stuff as well. So you might not make it, finish it, polish it up, and put it on your portfolio. Now, again, I already touched on this. My internship, that was something that was arranged through college, was one of the best experiences I think I could ever have. It got me a job in the industry, and I learned so much over there. So that is also something, but I guess you could also do that separate from college. Just write to a company and ask if you could do an unpaid internship or a traineeship there if you want to get like some experience. That would be something that I think is very, very valuable. And it's also a good lesson on how the industry actually works, because there's a big difference about sitting behind your computer like I'm right now, making my own projects, and actually working in a company with a lot of people. And so getting that experience in is really valuable, and it's also a good gauge to see if you're actually cut out for the games industry, because making games, it's not all fun and games, pun intended. That is something that I always say to people when they ask me, oh, so what do you do for a living? And I tell them, well, I'm a game designer. They're like, oh, that is so awesome, you make games. I'm like, oh yes, it is very awesome, and it's my It's my passion, right? But it's still work. I still have to do like actual work. So it's not all fun and games. So something like an internship can also be a very, very valuable tool to see if you like stuff like that. All right. Well, Nuggets, I'm going to cut it off right there. I hope you sort of enjoyed this story about my, life and how I got here. I got a lot of questions about this, so I figured, why not make a video about it? I'll be doing another devlog soon, and I will be making a video about how to build a portfolio, if that is something that you guys want to see. Let me know in the comments. Again, if you like this video, hit that like button. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, do that right now. And after you've done, why not wishlist ranged on Steam as well? And I will see you all in the next video, Nuggets.